NATO leaders will gather at a summit in The Hague next week where they are expected to discuss a proposal for allies to boost defence spending expenditure to 5% of GDP as called for by the US President Donald Trump. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has unveiled a plan which would break down the 5% target with 3.5% on core military spending and the remainder on defence-related projects. Rutte initially set a 2032 deadline for the increase, however this may be pushed back. However, at least one member has objected to the increased expenditure, with the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez pushing back on the target as unreasonable in a letter to the NATO Secretary General. The 5% target would be a tough ask for several European countries, with some needing to triple their defence spending budgets, whilst others are already running high deficits. A strong geographical divide exists within NATO. Within Europe as well, with NATO members closer to Russia outspending the likes of Spain and Portugal. Really important intervention now, I'm sure, from Ambassador Matthew Whitaker, who is the permanent representative of the United States to NATO. Ambassador Whitaker, it is an honour and a pleasure to speak to you today, sir, so thank you for joining the show. Look, you and I both remember the President lambasting the then Secretary General at that July 2018 breakfast meeting about the Germans who basically took Russian oil and gas but actually took American defence. The President was clearly right about the need for Europe to spend more. But 5%, sir, that's a tough ask for anyone, considering we've only really just got to 2% for most nations.
Yeah, well, it's good to be with you this morning. Let's unpack that. First of all, the Wales pledge that was made in 2014, all allies committed to or agreed to 2% of GDP for defense spending. We are just finally seeing this year and possibly into next year a few of our allies meet that 2%. But as you can see, and your headlines reflect the threat and the security environment that we find ourselves in, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in the Middle East, or whether it's in the Indo-Pacific. And all of our allies, all 32 members of NATO, and including plus our Indo-Pacific partners, need to invest a lot more in 21st century warfighting capabilities. We need to make sure that we're innovative, that we keep the technology advantage that we're seeing play out right now. While the Iranian air defense has been taken out, a lot of the Israeli air defense is certainly continuing to maintain. Same thing is happening in Ukraine, where Russia is not able to get air dominance like the Israelis have in Iran. And so you add all of that together, and it's a dramatically bigger need than what our allies are currently investing. The United States is in the same boat. We're going to have to invest dramatically as well. And so that's the situation we find ourselves in. We're in the middle of some very serious negotiations here in Brussels. All 32 allies are at the table. We're all talking. We're all being constructive. And we're all trying to make sure that we address all of these threats and all these security needs. And, the United States continues to be a good ally, a good friend. We're going to maintain our strength, because that's what's going to deliver peace globally. But at the same time, Steve, you know this, we need strong allies as well. And we can't have people that underspend on defense, that balance, their budgets on their defense capabilities. We need everyone to be strong. We need everyone to be investing. And we need a strong industrial manufacturing base on both sides of the Atlantic.
So absolutely, and look, I wouldn't disagree with you about anything, and having a bit of a veteran from various NATO meetings, from DC to Vilnius to Brussels as well. But the fact of the matter is the affordability, and even for the United States, and look, sir, Europe is grateful for the heavy lifting that the US has done on European defence post-1945. It's kept the peace, there's no doubt about it. But the fact of the matter is, the US defence budget for 2025, 2026, just under $1 trillion US. Very difficult for the US to increase that, which currently equates to somewhere in the region of 3.36%. So to see even the US get to 5%, that is a big ask, sir, even of your own nation.
Oh, there's no doubt. The U.S., like you said, is spending almost $1 trillion in this new proposed budget from the Trump administration. And that is a big lift. And in order to get, where we need to get in investing in things like infrastructure, mobility, and all of the additional things that are necessary are going to be crucial to the next war. Because remember, the first shot of World War III is going to be a cyber attack. It's not going to be tanks in Poland. And so we need to think about how we harden our societies, how we harden our infrastructure, and how we make sure that we can move military equipment if there is a land war in Russia, like we're seeing right now between land war in Europe. I'm sorry, like we're seeing between Russia and Ukraine, that we can move things, and the bridges and the railways and everything can handle all of the mobility issues that we currently face. And so you're right. If we're serious about this, and this is my point to my European colleagues, if we're serious about this, we're all going to have to roll up our sleeves. There is going to be collective sacrifice and a sober view of what the security situation is. And the United States has been clear. For 76 years now, our European allies in Canada have, for the most part, relied on the United States of America. And while we are still in NATO, we're going to continue to be a great friend and, most importantly, a great ally. We have other security needs. We're going to have to take capabilities, as we've communicated already, to our European allies. We're going to have to look at them taking over some of the responsibility, taking over primary responsibility for the traditional defense and security of Europe, so that the United States can be mobile and agile and address all the security threats that we have globally. And I think if we do it right, this will be a moment, historic moment. If we do it wrong, then unfortunately, I think there will be challenges that we all face that we shouldn't have to, because we're going to be smart. We're going to go to The Hague, and we're going to resolve this among friends and allies. And I think we're very close to a deal ultimately.
So you know the president way better than I will ever know him. He's the man who appointed you. Is 5% part of the deal? Is it an area where there's compromise to get to, let's say he really wants 3.5%, or actually is 5%, in your view, a hard level of which the US will not accept anything less? And if I may ask a second question as part of that as well, if the US doesn't get what it wants from The Hague, and if the president doesn't get what he wants, he has made the kind of language which has worried European allies that A, the US will walk from NATO, or B, the US will not be there to support Article 5 if another nation is attacked.
Yeah, this isn't some negotiating strategy. I mean, and more importantly, this isn't coming from Donald Trump. While he has said that 5% is the number, we're hearing it from General Cavoli, the Supreme Allied Commander of Europe, who a couple of weeks ago came to the North Atlantic Council and briefed us. And he said this formula that has 3.5% on capability targets on hard warfighting, plus the additional 1.5% that includes things like cybersecurity infrastructure, military mobility, and so many other things that we've negotiated and resolved here in Brussels. That 5% is the right number. That's what's necessary and needed for our security, and to make sure that we have peace through strength. Because if we don't have this strength, if we don't show that NATO is credible and serious about European and North Atlantic security, then obviously there are a lot of adversaries that will take advantage of that. And if we don't have strength, we won't have peace. But we need to make sure we have credible deterrence, and that credible deterrence, Steve, is only going to be reached if we do the 5% that 31 allies right now are committed to, and we just have one ally that we're going to have to continue to work with to make sure that they understand the challenges.
Ambassador, it's Karen jumping in, and good morning to you. The problem with setting hard and fast targets is that it can build inefficiencies in the system. For instance, getting to the right capacity, whether that comes at a higher cost because it is a forced decision, forced to get to 5%, forced to spend the money on defence. We've also got cheaper technologies coming into the mix, software capabilities for defence. So we have a target that is 5%. It could also be a nod to the old age of spending a lot on very advanced, very sophisticated weapons that are not necessarily the future of defence. How do you think about that and ensuring there's no inefficiencies in the execution process? No, Karen, that's a very insightful question. And I think one of the discussions that has been happening with a lot of our allies is these capability targets, this hard defense that we're going to have to invest in, the tanks, the artillery, the airplanes, and so many other things that are required
to make sure we have credible deterrence and defense, are expensive. But if there are allies that think they can do it cheaper, please teach us all, because it's not like we're in some, we want to spend this money. We're saying we have to spend this money, and our best judgment is that it's going to take serious trillions of dollars, both from the United States and our European and Canadian allies to do this. And it's things like icebreakers, because of what we're seeing in the high north, the Arctic. It is sensors and technology, to your point, and software, and all of those things, unfortunately, right now are expensive. If there is some breakthrough that makes this a lot cheaper to manufacture a tank in Lima, Ohio, I'm all ears. But at the same time, the sophistication of these systems oftentimes make them more expensive. But I think one of the advantages we will have as we ramp up defense spending is we will see that bulk purchasing, the ability to buy 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 missiles at a time, will, I think, give manufacturers an ability to expand their manufacturing base, both in the United States and in Europe. And I think you may see some efficiencies. I just don't think you're going to see a dramatic reduction in the cost of those capabilities over the near term.
Right. Ambassador, let me just come to some of the obstacles you're facing in Europe, the view of the clear and present danger being Russia, because the Spanish are asking for a carve-out around the 5% level. We know there are pockets of Europe, too, that are somewhat Russian-friendly at a leadership level. How do you overcome those obstacles and convince European member countries that, in fact, Russia is a danger and one of the motivating factors to rise to the 5% level on defense spending?
Yeah. Often I just turn to my Polish and Baltic friends, whether it's Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, where I've spent some time recently, and they can describe sort of the threats that emanate from Russia. A lot of our European allies are very concerned, especially about the hybrid activities, whether that's cyber attacks, whether that's, cable cutting or, anchor dragging in the Baltics, so many asymmetrical warfare things that are happening that, again, we have to harden our systems. We have to make sure that we have this deterrence in place and be credible to deter not only Russia, because, for the North Atlantic alliance, certainly Russia is the biggest strategic threat. However, I think globally, the United States continues to remind all of our allies that for the next 100 years or more, China is the biggest strategic threat that we all face, and we need to make sure that we are strong as an alliance and strong as allies to address all of these threats. And Iran obviously is actively lobbing missiles against Israel. We're concerned about an expansion of those threats as well. And so, it's a serious moment in human history, in world history, and in the history of this alliance. And so we're expecting all of our allies, Karen, to step up, to do what is necessary, to invest not only in the collective defense, but, NATO Article 3 also emphasizes each country investing in their individual defense. And that individual defense, if you're in Spain or in Italy or in Portugal or anywhere else, looks different, obviously, than if you're on the eastern flank. But it's not any easier. And the threats from the Sahel and from Africa and from the Middle East, obviously, are equally challenging. And so we all need to invest. We all need to be smart. We all need to coordinate. We all need to work within the NATO alliance. It's why it was built. It's why it's endured for 76 years. It's why it's the most successful alliance in the history of the globe. But at the same time, I think we are at a crossroads, and I'm here to represent President Trump and the American people to make sure that the American interests are not only addressed, but that Europe finally shares the burden, takes the fair share of European defense, and doesn't just free ride on the United States of America.
Absolutely so. Totally understandable. So, final question. You mentioned Iran and global challenges, which could be a threat to Europe in some way, shape or form, and to the United States' interests as well. In 1994, President Clinton didn't go ahead with a strike against North Korea, and they managed to develop a nuclear weapon thereafter. Do you think it's important that actually the Iranian nuclear threat is wiped out now before it becomes a reality?
Yeah, what matters is what President Trump thinks, and he has said very clearly that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, that it would, not only lead to an escalation across the Middle East as others tried to obtain nuclear weapons, but it would also create an existential threat to Israel and, quite frankly, to other allies of Israel, including the United States. That is unacceptable. And so, President Trump, I think, is taking the proper path here. He has suggested that, he is always open to negotiations, but he has a red line. And I think when the United States, Steve, draws a red line that, we should always be willing to do whatever is necessary to enforce that red line. And I'm sure that President Trump doesn't do that without, a sober, serious mindset as well. But I'm going to leave that to President Trump to navigate how best to address this situation. And at the same time, make sure his words matter. And his words are very clear. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon.
So you've been very generous with your time, and we appreciate it, and given us a superb preview of events in The Hague that we'll both be at next week. So thank you very much for your time today. Ambassador Matthew Whitaker, Permanent Representative of the United States to NATO. Thank you, sir.
The conflict between Israel and Iran is entering its second week, 7 days after Tel Aviv launched what it described as preemptive strikes on Tehran. Israel said its strikes were against Iran's nuclear program, while it also targeted and killed several top military commanders in the first few days. Israel announced a special state of emergency following the first strikes, and since then both sides have traded strikes. The conflict became the main topic of a G7 meeting in Canada, which President Trump left early, citing developments in the Middle East. The US leader has called for the unconditional surrender of Iran and claimed that while he knows where Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is, he would not take him out, at least for now. Speculation has raged that the US will get involved alongside Israel, with the White House saying on Thursday that it will make a decision in the next 2 weeks. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt outlined the president's key objectives.
No enrichment of uranium, and it would absolutely not. Iran is not absolutely not able to achieve a nuclear weapon. The president has been very clear about that. And by the way, the deal that Special Envoy Whitaker proposed to the Iranians was both realistic and acceptable within its terms, and that's why the president is sent that deal to them.
We've been talking about the oil price for a couple of weeks now, and this is how it looks over the course of 1 week. Clearly much firmer, as you can see, 3.6 up on the WTI price.
17% over 2 weeks now.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been quite strong, hasn't it?
13% last week, wasn't it?
I was looking at the start of June. We were at $63 on Brent and getting to the high points of roughly about 77.5.